Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Many southern Albertans were allowed to return home following devastating wildfires which ravaged our region. Firefighters in Lethbridge were kept busy with a house fire which leveled a home on the city's west side. And the province announced an expansion to its vaccine rollout, which will include those who are battling cancer or who have dementia.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal immunization experts have changed their recommendations for the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization says the vaccine should not be used on people under the age of 55. The AstraZeneca vaccine was approved last month for everyone over the age of 18. But at the time, the committee said there were not enough people included in clinical trials to be confident about how the vaccine would perform. Last week, the department changed its label on the vaccine to warn about the risk of blood clots, which have been reported in Europe. Both Prince Edward Island and Quebec have now suspended their use of the shot in younger patients. No word yet about Alberta. Now, the province did announce that it is expanding its vaccine rollout. Health officials say Phase 2 will include close to 1 million Albertans who have underlying health conditions, including those with disabilities, have cancer, dementia, or other conditions which put them at higher risk of COVID-19. Beginning April 5th, Alberta Health Services will begin taking bookings for those eligible who were born in or before 1959. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro said in a release today that the province is ramping up vaccinations as fast as the supply will allow. He's hoping that every Albertan will be offered a first dose by the end of June. Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips says she has a plan to help those who are suffering during the COVID-19 pandemic. AHS says our region, the South Zone, now has 13 outbreaks of the virus, 11 of which are in Lethbridge. Phillips says the Kenny government needs to do more to limit the spread of the virus and to help small business owners who are suffering.
We do need small and medium-sized business assistance, and we know that the province is still sitting on $130 million of their small and medium-sized business grant money. I think that a lot of small business owners and those who work for them would be quite shocked to learn that that is the case, and that should be immediately remedied. This disease remains very dangerous, both to our healthcare, to our economy, and to our individual families. And we should not be cavalier, and we need to be listening to healthcare professionals right now.
The province announced that over the last 24 hours, there were 545 new cases of COVID-19, totaling 7,922. There are currently 288 people in hospital with the virus, including 64 in intensive care. Here in the South Zone, there are 805 active cases of the novel coronavirus, and 487 of those are here in Lethbridge. As for our schools, there are 409 across the province, or around 17% on alert or have outbreaks. There are 1,809 cases which have been identified. A couple of schools within the Lethbridge School District went back to online learning due to an increase of COVID-19 cases. Both Winston Churchill High School and Galbraith Elementary now have students learning from home until the Easter break. Officials at the Lethbridge School Division say there are 9 cases of the virus at Winston Churchill, which remains on outbreak status. Agnes Davidson has been placed on alert status as AHS has identified 3 cases at that school. The school schedule is proceeding as normal. Alberta Energy Minister Sonia Savage says her government will be engaging Albertans to help create a new modern coal policy. The public input was initiated following public outcry from many Albertans about the coal mining taking place along the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies, which many feel will impact our water and change the entire landscape of the majestic Rockies. Minister Savage says an external committee will be chosen to lead the comprehensive public engagement process.
My goal is to ensure that the process is thorough and that it meets the needs of Albertans, and the Coal Policy Committee will do exactly that. Establishing a committee enables our government to develop a modern coal policy for Albertans by Albertans. The panel members each have an array of backgrounds and experience with coal development that will help us ensure the views of all Albertans are heard in this process.
Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips also responded to Minister Savage's announcement on engaging Albertans on coal development.
Albertans are in no mood for a government that's going to play games with our water and with blowing the tops off our mountains. Albertans have already spoken on this. They are not interested in these backroom deals that the UCP seems intent on moving forward with. What this shows us, they've also told our local municipalities that we're not allowed to talk about water within this consultation, which is completely crazy, because that is the whole basis of people's concerns, especially here in Southern Alberta, in a water-stressed region, where we're worried about the upstream effects on our water because that flows directly into our jobs and our livelihoods downstream here. Just beginning to end, it just seems like they think they can pull the wool over our eyes, and they're playing games.
Firefighters across southern Alberta were quite busy on Sunday dealing with 3 major wildfires which were out of control for a number of hours. An Alberta emergency alert was issued for the residents of Vulcan County around 3 p.m. as a wildfire up to 16 kilometers wide approached. That forced people to leave the village of Carmangay for Champion. Fortunately, the wildfire was contained and the evacuation order ended, so people began returning home. Another emergency alert was issued for the municipal district of Willow Creek, warning of a couple of wildfires burning east of Highway 2 between Staveley and Fort Macleod. Officials say due to strong winds, the grass fire was pushed towards Claire's home. Fortunately, fire crews got both fires under control by 7 p.m. EMS crews also responded to multiple reports of semi-tractors blown over from the strong winds, including this rake, which police found on its side on Highway 3 between Lethbridge and Colehurst. Traffic was down to a single lane for a few hours yesterday. In the early morning hours of Sunday, the historic Grange Hotel in Carmangay burnt to the ground. As Micah Quinn explains now, the hotel stood very strong for over 100 years before the unfortunate incident on Sunday morning.
This is the smoldering aftermath of the Grange Hotel fire in Carmangay. The village's fire department helped battle the blaze, along with help from firefighters from Vulcan County and surrounding areas.
Well, I looked out about 2 in the morning and all I could see was an orange glow, and very surprised and scared, because we're only a block away. And so you don't know which way the wind is going or where the fire's headed, so very scared. There was 8 fire departments. When we looked outside, we could see all the tanker trucks, and by that time they were well on their way to trying to extinguish it, protect the buildings around it, I guess.
The Carmangay Fire Department is run completely by volunteers, and Nichols' own son and daughter, who are on the force, work to contain the fire.
So they all have other jobs, and they got out and had to fight the fire for several hours. It really brings the community together, and not just Carmangay, but like the surrounding communities as well. Just jump in and pitch in and offer help and assistance wherever they can.
Nichols says that the hotel was built in 1909, and it had a rich history within the community.
Throughout the time, Carmangay's had some substantial fires over over 100 years, and it's always stood. And so it's a bittersweet day, for sure. Very sad. We've had our historic St. Paddy's Day parade that goes there every year for St. Paddy's Day, and yeah, it's a huge icon in our community, and it'll be sadly missed for sure.
No one was hurt in the blaze, and officials say that the cause of the fire is still under investigation. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Fire crews in the city of Lethbridge had to deal with a house fire on the city's west side on Sunday. Officials responded to the blaze on Trent Road West. Crews were able to prevent the fire from damaging nearby properties, but the fire destroyed the house. Damage was estimated at around $300,000. Fortunately, there were no injuries, and an investigation into the blaze is underway. The Red Cross is helping the displaced occupants of the home. The Lethbridge Hurricanes have lost 5 straight hockey games. Sunday's 5-4 overtime loss to the Medicine Hat Tigers marks the club's 7th straight loss to the Hat, dating back to September of 2019. After completing 3 consecutive games, coaches and players shared the challenges of back-to-back games and that they're looking forward to the bye week ahead.
3 and 3s are pretty tough, and to do 3 weeks in a row, your body gets pretty sore. So I think this off week's pretty well deserved, and I think we're going to take the most of it.
Is getting them on the ice a lot, doing a lot of skill stuff, doing some development stuff, maybe some power skating, and kind of putting the boys in a good space, making sure we're having fun every day when we go to the rink, and putting boys in a good spot, getting them ready to play the same team 3 times in a row. And I think that's a pretty good thing for the guys. It's a pretty good focus right now. We worked really hard on Saturday and Sunday, didn't love the results, but we've got a chance to kind of put our noses down and work for a couple weeks and have the same group 3 times in a row again.
The Hurricanes will play the Medicine Hat Tigers once again on April the 9th. Police in Brooks responded to a multi-vehicle collision earlier today involving between 50 and 70 vehicles in the westbound lanes of Highway 1. So far, no injuries were reported. Due to the snowy and icy conditions, emergency crews rerouted traffic to Highway 1A. Travel was not recommended on the area highways due to the poor road conditions and poor visibility. Pastor James Coates, who spent 35 days behind bars, returned to the pulpit on Sunday at the Grace Life Church just outside of Edmonton. Pastor Coates breached the COVID-19 public health order by holding full services at his church during the COVID-19 pandemic and not adhering to the 15% capacity limit. The church has continued to hold packed Sunday services despite RCMP and AHS inspectors appearing each week to ensure public health measures aimed at stemming the spread of COVID-19 are followed. RCMP say this past Sunday those measures were not followed while they were on scene. Coates was released from jail last Monday after pleading guilty to breaching a court undertaking that revolved around the COVID-19 public health restrictions. He received a $1,500 fine from the court. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is representing Pastor Coates. The group's president, John Carpe, says Coates' personal convictions tells him that he needs to do more than just host online services.
Pastor Coates has the conviction that Christians are supposed to meet together in person, and his conscience is telling him that the way to honor God is to obey God and to meet in person and to sing. And underlying all of that is that these charter violating restrictions on our freedom to assemble, to associate, to worship, all of these restrictions, the medical and scientific basis is just not there. 11 months ago, we were told that COVID was an unusually deadly killer. And I'm sure Pastor Coates and his church near Edmonton were, initially very cautious. But 11 months later, I mean, Statistics Canada tells us that the death rates in Canada in 2020 did not go up over 2019, 2018, 2017. So this is not an unusually deadly virus, and it is not spread by asymptomatic people. So healthy people are not spreading the virus. And there's just no scientific basis for the government's measures.
NDP leader Rachel Notley says she wants to see Coates Church, Grace Life Church, shut down. Kelly Stickle is the senior pastor of My Victory Churches here in southern Alberta. He says during uncertain times like these, it's very important to replace the what-ifs in life with God is.
So what if I get cancer? Well, God is my healer. Well, what if I lose my job? Well, God is my provider. Well, what if? And whatever the what if is, the Bible has the answer. And again, it shifts my focus, but it puts my trust in God. So
catch the full interview with Pastor Kelly as he discusses how God suggests we deal with fear. That interview is coming up later in our broadcast. You know, we've all lost someone close to us, whether it was a parent, a grandparent, or a friend. But how about losing your own child? Bridget Kloosterman lost both her son and daughter when they were teenagers from terrible accidents. She wrote a book about her journey called Goodbyes Are Always Hard. She lost her son when he was hit by a truck while riding his bike. She still remembers the call she received from the hospital when doctors and nurses tried everything to save her son.
Before I got the call from the hospital, I felt that this was the end, that I wasn't going to see Eric here on earth anymore. And then I got that phone call that really they had done everything and Eric was brain dead, and there was no point really in keeping the life supports on. So thankfully, my ex-husband was there, and he also agreed. So I'm glad that we all agreed, and my mom and Claudia, we all agreed that it was better to let Eric go.
Bridget Kloosterman will talk about how God helped her through the devastation of losing 2 children. That interview with Jeanette Rocher is coming up later in our broadcast. Communities along the Canada-U.S. border have faced a lot of challenges since the border was shut down last March. Jim Willett, the mayor of Coutts, Alberta, says businesses in the border town have struggled and many are missing their families on the U.S. side. The border closed to most travelers on March 21st of last year, the first such closure since Confederation in 1867. David Carson, who's the Reeve for Emerson Franklin in southern Manitoba, says the shutdown in his region has greatly affected the economy of his community. A report on last year's deadly crash in British Columbia involving a plane from the Snowbirds based in Saskatchewan is flagging concerns about the pilot's actions. Investigators say Captain Richard McDougall tried to turn his Tudor jet and return to the Kamloops airport, where he had just taken off after a bird strike caused his engine to stall. Past flight safety reports have recommended pilots climb straight ahead to give themselves time to either regain control of their aircraft or allow for a safe ejection. McDougall's passenger, Captain Jennifer Casey, died in the crash, and McDougall was seriously hurt, but he survived. Residents in North Vancouver left flowers and messages of support on Sunday near the scene of a stabbing scene around the Lynn Valley Library the day before. Investigators say a 28-year-old man has now been charged with second-degree murder in the attacks that left a young woman dead and 6 other people injured. Police say the suspect in the North Vancouver stabbings was known to police.
I can tell you that he's had police interactions in the past. He does have a criminal record. And obviously, one of the priorities is to look into his past. And I said it before, but the question of why, motive, why exactly would drive somebody to do what they did this afternoon. That is going to be the number one question for us. You have every available I-hit homicide detective here in North Vancouver this afternoon. And every available North Vancouver serious crime investigator working on this.
Hundreds of demonstrators rallied in Los Angeles over the weekend, demanding an end to the surge of anti-Asian hate and violence across many parts of the United States.
We're tired of our voices being silenced. We're tired of being marginalized. We are tired of being the scapegoats. And it's time to, we're standing together to say that we are Americans. We love this country and to stop Asian hate.
Unfortunately, it took a massacre, the killing of 8 people, for people to finally pay attention and know that this is a real crisis across the country.
Salvage teams were finally able to set free a colossal container ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal, halting $9 billion in daily global trade. This brings an end to a crisis for nearly a week that clogged one of the world's most vital maritime arteries. Officials say 11 tugboats helped to free the 220,000-ton ship that was 1,300 feet long. The backlog will free close to 400 other ships, which are carrying billions of dollars in freight. Officials say it could take 6 days or more to clear the line. The journey to cross the canal normally takes 10 to 12 hours. It was a winter wonderland in our city today with very slippery conditions. Fortunately, a warming trend is on the way and the meltdown should begin fairly soon. Full weather details are on deck. We had lots of snow and a wind chill earlier today, which made it feel like minus 18 degrees. Ouch. Fortunately, the warmer temperatures should be returning. Jeanette Roche is back with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, the sunshine and much warmer temperatures should begin as early as what, Wednesday?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's going to be an April Fool's joke later on this week, but by April 1st, we are looking at a high of 20 degrees. And like you were saying, Wednesday, look at that jump up to 14 there, especially after today where we woke up to snow and minus temperatures. Maybe today was the April Fool's joke. I don't know. What about that wind yesterday and last night? We're talking gusts up to 120 kilometers per hour overnight as well. My house was shaking. Yeah, tonight, not as bad. Still a bit windy, but not like it was before. So 50K gusts is what we're looking at this evening. Overnight low of minus 11. By the time we wake up tomorrow, the wind chill could feel about like minus 18, but it's going to climb to 3 degrees tomorrow with sunshine on our Tuesday. Into Wednesday, like you were saying, that drastic jump up to 14 degrees. And then we're looking at 20 on Thursday. Maybe we will break a record that day. Who knows? 10 degrees is our high on Friday, 12 on Saturday, and then on Sunday, a high of 9 degrees. We're looking at a chance of rain or snow. So we're a little bit all over the place. It's definitely springtime in Alberta, and that's kind of what you get at this time of year. Mainly out of our seasonal averages, depending on what day of the week you're looking at. So definitely Wednesday, Thursday into the weekend, higher than the average of 9 degrees, minus 4 the average low. 23 was our high temperature back in 1966, and in 1965 it was a low of minus 17. That was the lowest day on record for this day. 7:14 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this evening just before 8 p.m. right at 7:58. So enjoying these longer days of sunlight for sure. Over on the west coast into tomorrow, sunshine, Victoria, 11 degrees, 10 degrees in Vancouver with a mix of sun and clouds. Sunshine in Edmonton tomorrow with a high of 4 degrees. Same thing for Calgary with a high of 4. Both of those cities looking at wind 20K to 40 kilometer per hour gusts. So not even as windy as Lethbridge tomorrow. Now there's a low pressure system making its way across the prairies, intensifying across across Saskatchewan. Winter storm in effect for both Saskatoon and Regina. Tonight, by tomorrow, not quite as bad. 30% chance of flurries in both of those cities. Winnipeg intensifying, lots of blowing snow. They're up to 80 km/h wind gusts and a 60% chance of flurries in Winnipeg tomorrow. Toronto, lovely day. Sunshine, 16 degrees, 16, same thing, Ottawa, Montreal, 14 degrees. Both Toronto and Ottawa going to be a bit gusty as well with the winds, 50K and 60K in both of those cities. Across Atlantic Canada, rain today and tonight, but into tomorrow, clearing up for a beautiful 10 degrees in Fredericton, 8 in Halifax, 4 in Charlottetown with beautiful sunny skies. St. John's, though, high winds and blowing snow advisory in effect. 0 degrees is the high for tomorrow. There you have it. That is your forecast.
Chief executives of Rogers and Shaw Communications appeared before a Commons Committee today, facing questions about the $26 billion merger of the two companies. The committee will also hear from government officials and advocacy groups over the 2 days of hearings about Rogers' proposed takeover of Shaw. The deal has faced stiff opposition from consumer groups and customers who argue that Canada needs more and not less competitors in the telecom industry. In announcing the deal on March 15th, company officials say they're confident they will receive regulatory and government approval by early next year. Molson Coors Beverage Company says it continues to experience delays in its businesses in Canada, the US, and the UK, resulting from a cyber attack earlier this month. The Montreal and Denver-based company says it made progress in restoring its systems with all breweries producing and shipping products and ramping back up to normal operation levels. Despite receiving help from tech experts, the cyber incident is still impacting its brewery operations, production, and shipments in the 3 countries. China is stepping up pressure on foreign shoe and clothing brands to reject reports of abuses in Xinjiang. It is telling companies that are targeting Beijing for boycotts to look more closely and saying there's no forced labor. H&M, Nike, and Adidas are caught in a conflict of Xinjiang after many countries imposed sanctions on Chinese officials accused of abuses. State media in China called for a boycott of H&M for saying it would no longer use cotton from the region. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 33 points on the day to finish at 18,719. The Dow was up 98 points to 33,171. The S&P 500 was down 3 points to 3971, and the Nasdaq was down 79 points on the day to 13,060. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 62 cents to 61.59 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to 2.59 US. Gold was up 16 cents to 17.1236 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 24.66 US an ounce. Wheat is at $305 per metric ton, barley's at $315, canola's at $7.46, and corn is at $331 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 88 cents to 120.98, feeder cattle were up $1.95 to 147.08, and lean hogs were down 43 cents to $100.38. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.41 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, federal immunization experts have changed their recommendations for the Oxford-AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization says the vaccine should not be used on people under the age of 55. The AstraZeneca vaccine was approved last month for everyone over the age of 18, but at the time the committee said there were not enough people included in clinical trials to be confident about how the vaccine would perform. How should we as a society handle fear? What does God say about fear and how we should approach it? Pastor Kelly Stickle, senior pastor with My Victory Churches, gives us his thoughts and what the Bible has to say about it in just a moment. Fear, it's everywhere in our society. We tend to fear things like losing our job. We fear failure, what the future may hold. And of course, a lot of people fear getting sick and dying, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining us now to talk about how to overcome our fears is Pastor Kelly Stickle, the lead pastor of My Victory Churches in Lethbridge and Southern Alberta. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Pastor Kelly.
Thanks for having me, Hal. It's great to be here.
You bet. I'm not sure we've ever seen this kind and this level of fear before in our lifetime, especially in my lifetime. Now, some fears can be justified, but do you think a lot of the fears we have are somewhat irrational or even unjustified?
Yeah, I would say that probably the majority of the fear that we have as human beings is unjustified. We have this magical way of having our brains just drift off into what ifs and the unknowns, and a lot of those things we will conjure up, and the more we focus on them and pander to those what ifs, those imaginations, the worse it gets. And I think just human nature for all of us is that we do battle fear, and the majority of those fears would definitely be irrational.
Now, Pastor Kelly, some people might argue, listen, I'm not afraid, I'm just a little concerned here. So in your opinion, what's the difference between fear and simply being concerned about something?
Yeah, I think when again concern is healthy, and fear, there's a healthy part of fear that is, we want to be cautious, and it's a protective mechanism for all of us. So having concern is good, but I think when you dwell on concern and probably put your focus there and your weight on concern, it easily drifts into irrational fear, and we go beyond just being cautious to being to being imprisoned by and locked down by fear. And I think when it crosses over into fear, with concern, you should still be able to move ahead, but fear is going to actually cause you to pause and to either fight or flight or freeze. And I think it's important for us. We don't want to get into a place where we just stop and we don't move ahead and we don't progress, and that's when it becomes, I think, dangerous fear.
You know, you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes people are so afraid, so fearful, that they just stay where they are. They don't move. They don't progress or move forward, like you said. Now, there are differing views on how to respond to the COVID-19 situation. Now, but whatever an individual's opinion may be on wearing masks or getting vaccinated, what advice do you have for those who are living in a constant state of fear?
Well, I'm not going to take sides on masks or no masks or any of that. But when it comes to dealing with fear is unhealthy. In my opinion, it's a deadly virus in and of itself. And I say that because it continually grows. It doesn't seem to go away. It dwells unless you intentionally address it and move beyond that. But in order to move beyond fear, I think one of the biggest things that we need to be able to do is as a Christian, we should put our trust in God. And a lot of times our fear is based on the unknown or the uncertainty. And that's certainly what's going on now, is the uncertainty of the virus, the uncertainty of the economy, the uncertainty of school and protection, and all the crazy stuff that's going on right now creates this uncertainty, and uncertainty feeds fear. But ultimately, as Christians, our trust needs to be in God. And there's a lot of what ifs we can't answer right now, a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainties. But ultimately, God has not left the throne. God has nothing's outside of his control. And ultimately, to overcome our fear, it's looking to him and saying, okay, I trust you, and what that you are still in control.
Do we tend to believe our circumstances more than believing in what God has truly promised for our lives?
Absolutely. I think just human nature for all of us, that we will focus on our circumstance, because our circumstance, let's just be real, that's what's tangible right in front of us. That's what we see, touch, sense. And that's, right there. And so because it's so prevalent in our lives and so right there, when you're going through a disease, you feel the pain. Well, that's a circumstance, you feel that. So to say I'm feeling pain, can I still have faith in God? Yes, but you actually have to take your mind and saying, I'm going to look beyond what I see, feel, sense, and I've got to still trust that and lean on God and trust him.
So Pastor Kelly, why do you think so many people fear death? And how can we get to the point of faith that we trust God so much that we actually are okay with the prospect of dying?
Well, as believers, I mean, Paul addressed this multiple times in the Bible, and he was addressing a church that was facing threats of death every single day just for being believers. And so it's a very real fear. And I think the reason why we fear death is because it's the great unknown. It's we just don't know, and certainly our minds can play tricks on us because we don't know. We've never been there. What's going to happen, and how's it going to happen? And we all have our speculations. But what Paul said to the believers, and what the writer of Hebrews said as well, is that, especially the writer of Hebrews said that this hope is an anchor for our soul. Well, the hope that he was referring to is the resurrection of Jesus, and the fact that because of the resurrection of Jesus, that means that there is eternal life for us. And a lot of times, the death and the fear of death, we have to go past the unknowns to get to what we do know. Well, Jesus did, as believers, we believe Jesus did rise again from the dead. And because of that, it's not there's different definitions of hope. And hope can be wishful thinking, or hope can be absolute certainty. And when we lean into the resurrection of Jesus, we have absolute certainty that our eternities are sealed, and we need to sometimes place our mind there and go, no, that I know where I'm going when I die, and that erases that fear.
So what are the consequences of living in fear, and how does this impact the way we live our daily lives, outside of maybe getting an ulcer, having to deal with that, and having to deal with high blood pressure?
Well, funny story that you bring up high blood pressure, because I'll just be a little bit vulnerable here. I came to we talked about fear being irrational, and I had, for the longest time, my mom about 12 years ago passed away from a battle with cancer. And when you watch someone so close to you die, cancer is a terrible disease. It's a merciless disease, and it's tragic to someone to pass away from, but what it does to the body and all the rest of it. Well, that I didn't realize, after mourning her, I didn't realize that it created this fear inside of me of cancer and of that. And so I had this fear of doctors. And a couple of years ago, I went to the doctor, and the doctor says to me, he says, "You've got crazy high blood pressure, and alarmingly so. We're gonna have to get you on medication like right away." And he sent me home with this blood pressure machine. I was like, man, I felt healthy. I've work out all the time. I eat properly. Like, I was like, what is the problem? And it's funny, I took the blood pressure machine home and plugged it in, and my blood pressure was, be like at the very healthiest level that it possibly could be all throughout the week. And so I brought her back into the doctor, and the doctor, he's like, you know what the problem is? He said, Kelly, he says, this machine, he says, the problem is you're afraid of me. And I went, what? And he said, when you walked into here, your heart rate ran up, your blood pressure, to the place where it increased your blood pressure to an unhealthy level. And I was like, what are you talking about? And it kind of hit me right in the face. And I walked out, I was like, why am I afraid? Well, I was afraid of going to the doctor, talk about irrational fear. I was afraid of going to the doctor because of him diagnosing and saying, well, you have cancer. Well, the funny thing is the doctor is not the enemy. He's not the one that gives you the cancer. He's the one that actually is going to, if you do have cancer, he's the one that you need to help you kind of walk through the whole process and to save you from all that thing. But this irrational fear came into my heart that it does affect your health. It affects your mind. It affects your relationships. It affects your ability to move forward. Your greatest potential is going to be held back because you can get trapped in fear. And so fear is deadly. I think it's the great captivator, and I'm really quite concerned. Interesting choice of words, I think, but I'm really quite concerned because in our society, I think fear is so prevalent today, more so that it's creating craziness in our world, irrational behavior, irrational conversations, tensions like we've never seen before. And it's just, we look and go, the world's going crazy. And I think the root of that is fear.
You know what I've noticed as well, Pastor Kelly, that even kids are becoming more fearful of the future. Many are believing the mainstream media, playing a lot into people's fears. Will my grandparents die from the coronavirus? Will the world end because of climate change? Any thoughts on how to instill hope and faith in our younger generation?
It's funny you'd ask that. I just heard today that they just did a survey in the US, and they discovered that the people that are most vulnerable and should be the most afraid of the virus are the ones that are least afraid. And in fact, the study showed that the older you are, the more resilient you are, and the less fearful you are in these circumstances. And that really, this virus and the lockdowns and the media and all the rest of feeding a lot of fear into our young people. And I think that's dangerous. And they said one of the things, and they're pressing into why the older generation is less fearful than the younger generation. What's the tension here? But I think as we age, we we go through things and going, I made it through that. I survived that. This is not going to be a problem. I've made it through this trial. I can do that. And so sometimes we can have, just through the act of courage and going through a process, we will learn and we become more bold and saying, yeah, I can survive that. I can survive this. And I think for young people, a lot of it is, the fear is just lack of experience or just naiveness as to, is this big, and realizing, I think you realize, like I realize, that, the media is getting paid by fear. They get more hits if they can create more sensational headlines and more fear. That companies will actually sell and make more money based on fear. They'll drive this fear of you not having that, and they know that it makes money, so fear sells. And because of that, our whole society is so adept to fear that we don't even realize it's fear anymore that's motivating us.
Do you think it's really important to make a list of things we're thankful for to take the focus off of fear and maybe more onto appreciation?
Yeah, again, it becomes what you focus on. So if you focus on what you don't have, you're going to be susceptible to fear. If you focus on missing out, you're going to be susceptible to fear. So Paul said it in Philippians, right? He says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition. So he said, okay, present every situation to God and saying, okay, I trust you. That's number one. But then he says, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And it's so important that he said with thanksgiving, because why is that? Well, thanksgiving shifts your focus to what I do have, the strength I have, the things that are good, the things that I'm thankful for. And that shift of focus, I think, gives us the courage to be able to move ahead.
Some recent stats we dug up from Statistics Canada also talks about the fact that less and less couples are getting married these days. Apparently, one of the main reasons given was the fear of getting divorced. Your thoughts?
Yeah, again, it's what you focus on. So we have this what if scenario in our head all the time and going, well, what if it doesn't work out? Well, that's a crazy thing. Like, what if it does? Like, what you're missing out if you don't move ahead. So like, you're afraid of missing out, so you don't move at all. And that's how fear works. It's just completely irrational. And I think the fear of commitment, and a lot of that is driven by, and a lot of our fears are driven by past pains. So these young people who have seen a divorce or lived through a divorce as a child, saying, I don't want that, and that past pain is now feeding this fear ahead, instead of saying, hey, I saw that mistake, I can learn from that mistake, and I saw what didn't work, and I'm going to apply this so that it will work. Is again what you focus on, you're going to give power to.
So Pastor Kelly, any final advice for viewers who are struggling with fear today?
Yes, absolutely. I think the greatest advice that we can do, this is what's worked for me, and this is actually my whole story about going to the doctor. This is kind of how I got myself out of that fear. Is a lot of times fear is fed by the what ifs. So what if I get cancer? And so my advice to people is, identify the what ifs and replace it with God is. So what if I get cancer? Well, God is my healer. Well, what if I lose my job? Well, God is my provider. Well, what if? And whatever the what if is, the Bible has the answer. And again, it shifts my focus, but it puts my trust in God. So I'd encourage everybody that if you're battling with fear, and let's just be honest, all of us do. This is not something that's anyone's exempt from. But when we battle with fear, just replace your what if with God is.
I love that. He's our comforter and our provider. Kelly Stickle, the lead pastor of My Victory Churches in Lethbridge and Southern Alberta, thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much, Hal. This has been great.
Life sometimes throws us some curveballs and some difficult challenges, but I think most of us would agree that likely the most difficult would be losing one of our own children. Today's guest is going to share her heart-wrenching story of losing not one child, but both of her children in two separate tragic accidents, and how God helped her make it through. Bridget Kloosterman is the author of Goodbyes Are Always Hard. She joins me now via Skype from Smithers, British Columbia. Welcome to Bridge City News. Bridget, it's so great to have you on today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Bridget, you have an unusually tragic story. We appreciate you having the courage to share it with us. Can you briefly share a bit about your son, Eric, and what happened on that fateful day?
Yeah, Eric was a very lively boy, very energetic and athletic. And on that fateful day, he was working in an organic bakery. The owner of the bakery had lost a son, and Eric was he was kind of like an uncle to Eric, and Eric just loved it there. And on that day, another boy was visiting to learn a little bit about the baking, and they had gone on a bike ride, unbeknown to the owner, to the uh, boss, to the baker, and they were racing the bike. Probably they were going to get a treat or something from the store, and they were racing, and they raced through a stop sign, and a truck was coming and didn't see my son, but saw the first boy, and he veered out, and they collided. Like, he veered out to miss the first boy and hit Eric. Yeah, they collided, and someone told me was at the accident site very shortly after the accident and said that Eric was unconscious pretty much right away.
Okay. How old was Eric when this happened?
13.
13 years old. And how long ago was this? What year did this happen in?
1995.
Oh, gosh. That is horrible. So, how did you first react to the news of your son's accident?
Well, actually, a police lady called me at work. I was working at the public health unit in Dawson Creek, and I got this phone call, and she said, Eric's been into an accident, but it's about time that he would like to see family. So I didn't think it was very serious. So I just left everything on my desk and went over to the hospital, was just 2-minute walk away. And when I went in there was an ambulance driver there who knew me because I had immunized her children. And she said to me, it's iffy. So then I thought, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And they right away ushered me into a quiet room. And I couldn't even see Eric at all because they were working on him. But the amazing thing is there was a Bible in that quiet room. And I just opened it up and my eyes just hit this verse that says, death, where is your sting? In 1 Corinthians 15, and that we have victory over death. And wow, that was just so amazing that I just, saw that verse that was from the Lord. Yeah.
So then what happened?
And then I didn't really hear much for hours, for quite a few hours. It was quite difficult. My pastor came and he was really good. He hugged me and yeah. And then Claudia was on a paper route, and then somebody notified my mom. I'm not sure, I can't remember if it was me, but she then knew about it. I must have told her about it, yeah. And then Claudia went to my mom and she told her.
And Claudia is your daughter?
Yes, Claudia's my daughter, yes. And then eventually my mom came up to the hospital too. And some friends of ours were willing to drive us to Edmonton because it turns out that they were shipping Eric out to Edmonton because we were living in Dawson Creek at the time, and Edmonton was the nearest bigger center. So that's what happened. My friends, they were our care group leaders, and they drove us down to Edmonton, and Eric went on the plane.
Okay, and was there a point in time when you had to make a decision about him?
Yes, it was 8 days. It was touch and go, quite difficult. And the staff were wonderful. They were really wonderful. And they tried everything. But after 8 days, and the strange thing was that I felt this too. On that day before I got the call from the hospital, I felt that this was the end, that I wasn't going to see Eric here on earth anymore. And then I got that phone call that really they had done everything and Eric was brain dead. And there was no point really in keeping the life supports on. So thankfully, my ex-husband was there and he also agreed. So I'm glad that we all agreed, and my mom and Claudia, we all agreed that it was better to let Eric go. It was very difficult, but we knew that he would, the Eric that we knew, the vibrant Eric, he was a whirlwind. He wouldn't, that was gone. So it was best to let him go.
I can imagine how difficult that must be. I can't even imagine, actually. So how did this affect your faith? Did it at all?
Not really, because I was already quite strong in my faith at that point. And I remember thinking, we always say, we have faith and that we are Christian, but then we also, when the test comes, we've got to keep trusting. So that's what I was thinking. Like, there's no point, saying I'm a Christian, and then when the crunch comes, then just to, lose your faith. So that I was really aware of that.
Yeah. Now you had a daughter as well, Claudia, and how did she handle the news of her brother dying? Did it affect her relationship with God at all?
Not as far as her relationship with God. Like, it really did affect her. She was very, very sad, and she felt quite guilty because, brother and sister, they fought quite a bit, and she sometimes had said some nasty things to him, and she felt really bad about that. And what helped her was writing letters. A counselor had suggested that, writing letters to Eric, and that's what she did. And she had a dream of seeing Eric in heaven.
Oh, wow.
And he gave her, yeah, that was wonderful. He gave her a big hug. So this really helped her. But as far as her faith, no, she, really drew closer to God, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, she was younger than Eric when Eric died,
Yeah.
right? And so fast forward a few years, right? So, and then something horrible happens to Claudia. Maybe tell us about that. So there was another tragic accident in your family. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about that?
Yes. Well, what happened was that I was at Bible seminary in Briarcrest, and we found out about this mission in northern Manitoba, Thompson Continental Mission. And I really felt called to work with First Nations people. And I found out that they had a summer camp and were looking for volunteers. So Claudia and I felt that this would be really good to test out whether this mission was the right place to go to. So we applied to work there, and Claudia was going to be a junior counselor, and I was camp nurse and kitchen help and wherever needed. And so that's what we did, and we just loved it there. And towards the end, we had about 1 week left, I think, that we wanted to see these waterfalls. So it was a day off, and we went with a few staff members to these waterfalls, and we just were so excited because it was just so beautiful. And Claudia went with a couple of girls onto this, well, they approached the waterfalls like a big cliff, a big rock there, and Claudia stepped out onto the rock. The other girls didn't, but she did, and there was some water that had splashed up onto the rock, and she lost her footing and fell into the waterfalls.
So you were there, you were present, but okay.
I was present, but I didn't see her fall in, thank goodness. But I heard something. Claudia fell into the waterfall, and I just thought, oh Lord, how am I going to go through this a second time? That was my first thought. I thought, how can that be? Like, I was just, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And then, this victim's assistance person came, and the police came, and she was really good from victim's assistance. She was so caring and wonderful, really. And they had a helicopter come and everything.
So how old was Claudia when this happened?
16. They didn't actually find her right away. Like, they didn't find her with the helicopter. It took 3 days. They found her with a boat with ropes and weights on the ropes, and that's how they found her. Yeah, it took 3 days. She was 16.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was 3 horrible days. Yeah, it was really awful. I remember just wanting to scream, even when we were driving from the waterfalls on the first night there back to Thompson. I just wanted to scream. Oh, awful.
You poor woman. I can't even imagine how anyone could endure what you've been through. Honestly, I mean, you'd have thoughts of like, is God punishing me? Like, what's going on? And I'm sure you felt that way too at times.
Well, I just couldn't quite understand it, but I didn't really think of punishment so much. I don't remember thinking that, but I
Right.
just, yeah, I was puzzled. I was very puzzled why this would happen again. And yeah.
That's awful. So you've had to endure this horrible grieving process. How long does the grieving process take? Does it ever really stop? Does hope and joy return at some point?
Well, in my the intensity of the grief gets much less. And I remember there was a friend who called me faithfully every day for the first year approximately, and that was so helpful. Oh my, she was over in BC and I was in Saskatchewan going to Bible school, and I just looked forward to that call. And I remember after 7 months telling her, now I can imagine a life without Claudia. That was a real turning point.
Wow.
That,
Why don't you tell us really quickly about your book? I understand you had some friends who were instrumental in your writing this.
Yes, well, actually, Claudia had left quite a detailed diary, and they both really thought that diary just was very memorable, and they encouraged me to write a book. And one of them, Sheila Webster, she was my classmate in seminary, and she was really helpful too in finding the title and just different tips that she gave me. And then Ruth Cherniak Smith, she's a writer, and she helped me a lot. And she wrote the introduction. She did an excellent job, introduction of the book, and just helped connect the diary entries together. She wrote connections there, really did a wonderful job. So I'm very, very thankful for that. Yeah.
Okay, and this helped you through your own grieving process, right? And you're hoping now that it can help others.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And yeah.
what advice, Bridget, would you have for someone who is currently grieving the loss of a loved one?
Well, I would say don't try to skip the grieving process, which I tried to do with my son. It just doesn't work. It's very important to take time to grieve. Really, yeah, you can't skip that. It's important to talk about the person who's died, to look at pictures. We had videos of the funeral services, which really helped us. And yeah, that helped us just looking at them. It was just, and the comments that people had made, it was just encouraging, or looking at some of the cards that were sent. And also it helps to reach out. A few months after Eric died, we contacted this orphanage that we had heard about from our church in Mexico. And we made plans to go there, and we had a year of preparing and learning Spanish and everything. And that helped us so much. I think, reaching out to others is very, very helpful.
Right. So basically, it's a dark valley that you have to go through. You can't avoid it. And then to start looking outwards beyond yourself to others. Well, Bridget, thank you so much for sharing this tragic story with us. And you are the author of Goodbyes Are Always Hard. Where can people find your book? Where is it available?
Yeah, we're just in the process of starting a website, and it'll be called goodbyesarealwayshard.com. It's already registered, and it's all small letters and one word. And right now I still have a few hard copies, and also if they email me at bkloost@gmail.com, I could also send digital copies.
Okay, yes, because we were talking before and you were saying your goal here isn't to make money on the book necessarily. It was all about your grieving process, trying to go through that, and now hopefully it can help others do the same.
That's right. That's the main thing, to help others. Yeah.
Well, Bridget, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a pleasure to speak with you. God bless you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and God bless you too.
Thank you. I'm Jeanette Roche. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.